The table at the exit, there are nomination applications. If any of you here have anyone in mind who you might want to nominate to be potentially a member of the Hall of Fame, or you can go on the Abington High School website and download a copy there at any time. Also, I wanted to point out, you probably all noticed on your tables the frames with some of the old pictures of all of our inductees, and the frames are a great invention by one of the Abington High School graduates, Mike Haggerty from 1977, called the Pitcher Catcher Bats. And Mike Haggerty is here tonight. Yeah. Mike, where are you? Stand up a little wave. Michael donated all of the Pitcher Catcher Bats tonight. And about half of them are engraved with the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame. So I hope the families and the inductees that are here tonight will take those home with you as a souvenir. And Michael, thank you very much for your generosity. Another 1977 Abington High School graduate doing well. And these were actually featured the ESPY Awards and some upcoming Major League Baseball banquets and other sports banquets, so congratulations. At this time, I want to go off the agenda for a second. Many of you present and former residents of Abington may be familiar with the Dyer Memorial Library, which is located on Center Avenue here in Abington Center. The Dyer Memorial Library is a privately funded library containing a huge volume of information, artifacts, newspapers, collectibles, all sorts of things regarding the history of the town of Abington. And a special exhibit regarding the history of sports in Abington will soon be opened there to the public. I'd like to introduce Ms. Eileen Walls, a former student athlete of Abington High and a very active supporter of the Athletic Hall of Fame, and invite her to provide you with some information about the upcoming exhibit and the events which will celebrate Abington sports at the Dyer Memorial Library. Eileen?
Congratulate this year's inductees into the Abington Athletic Hall of Fame. It's wonderful to see so many people here honoring you, and I'm really enjoying all the stories by both the presenters and the inductees. I'd like to thank Sean and all the members of the Hall of Fame committee who coordinate, organize, and work so hard each year to pull this wonderful event together. As Sean said, the Dyer Memorial Library is a historical research library here in Abington. It's kind of a little gem that a lot of people don't know about, and I'd like to tell you about it so that you'll all come visit. And very often the Dyer Library and the Historical Society of Old Abington work together to present a slice of Abington history. On November 1st, the Historical Society will host author Scott Sacco for a conversation about the Abington-Whitman-Hanson Thanksgiving Day football rivalry. Mr. Sacco wrote a book called The Little Big Game with his friend Paul Schofield. And the book goes into the story of the over 100-year competition between Whitman and Abington on Thanksgiving Day. Mr. Sacco will visit the library on November 1st, and in conjunction with his visit, the Dyer Library is putting together an exhibit that will also open on November 1st about sports in Abington. The exhibit will have photographs and memorabilia going back to the 1800s. We have some pictures of baseball teams from some of the shoe factories in town. We also have a lot of Old Town football artifacts and a lot of more recent sports remembrances from recent football and baseball teams here in Abington. So I'm inviting anyone and everyone here tonight who's interested in Abington sports or old Abington history to join us on November 1st at the Dyer for Mr. Sacco's talk, or just come up to the Dyer anytime to view the exhibit. We're open Tuesdays through Fridays, 1 to 5, and everybody's welcome. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your evening.
My name is Susan Cashman-Madden, and I'm a member of the Abington High School class of 1990, and also a proud member of the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame from the class of 2014. It is my honor and privilege to announce that Coach Thomas J. Graham will be our next inductee into the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame. It is my pleasure to invite Mr. Timothy Graham and Miss Kathleen Graham Deulis to come forward to represent the Graham family. Coach Graham's sons, and as a former AHS baseball player who was coached by his father, Tim Graham has been asked to formally introduce and induct his father into the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame, and his commemorative Hall of Fame pin will then be presented to his daughter, Kathleen Graham Deolis. Ladies and gentlemen, we are proud to induct as a member of the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame, Mr. Thomas J. Graham.
Good evening. It's a great honor here to be tonight to speak on behalf of my father. It's funny, as I was getting ready to be introduced, I started looking around and I see a lot of people talking and hearing a little bit of noise. And growing up, my dad was always my idol. And when he doesn't know that I used to do a lot of impersonations of my father over the year. And in his classroom, in the corner, there was a podium very similar to this, where he used to preach and teach and all those things. But as you sat in the classroom, sometimes you start talking and making a little bit of noise, and Dad had a very unique way of teaching or getting people's attention, namely throwing tennis balls and erasers across the classroom or walking up behind you and clapping to make sure you're paying attention. So I just brought a little memory back, just sitting there waiting my turn to come up here. I want to thank the Hall of Fame Committee. I want to congratulate the fellow inductees. Growing up, to always hear the stories about Mr. Pastor, and the other inductees, and to be able to see him being on here tonight, it's wonderful. I want to thank the committee. I want to congratulate you all. I want to thank Roger Woods for nominating my father. This is a very special night for Green Wave Athletics, and as it's been said before, this is something that's been long overdue. We always had, and it kills me to say because I live in East Bridgewater now, Green Wave pride, but when I did grow up in this town, we did have Green Wave pride, and it's nice to see those who excelled on the athletic field to be honored for their accomplishments. As many of you know, 10 plus years ago, my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. It's been very difficult to watch him fade away from us. But in true Tom Graham fashion, he continues to battle every day. He doesn't want anybody to feel sorry for him, because as he said when he first got sick in one of the conversations we had, my first 60 years of life were greater than most people's full lifetime. So Dad would really love to be here tonight and spend time with all of you and talk about all of you, because that's what was important to him. Here with me tonight is my sister Kathy. I'd like to acknowledge my sister Mary Kate, my brothers Tommy, John, and Dennis, and my oldest son Ryan is here as well. There's a tremendous amount of family members here with us tonight, fellow coaches and former ball players. But there was one lady that would always make my dad brighten up when he would speak, and that would be my mother, Mary. Mom, you are the most amazing person I've ever known. Dad would always light up when you walked in a room. Dad was always known for taking great historic quotes and changing them to his own liking, quite frequently. There was the quote about behind every great man is a woman, and Dad would always change that to say beside every great man is a woman. And that is true. Mom, you've always been there for him. Win or lose, long games, extra long days at school, dealing with all us 6 kids, and even today, the way that you take care of Dad as he battles his Parkinson's disease. We are all blessed and honored to have you as our mom. So, no, I'm not going to hear the end of that one because Mom never liked the limelight. She always liked to be in the background. Correct, Mom? I'm Timmy, the 4th child, the 3rd boy, class of 91, as Sue mentioned. Always known growing up as one of the grandkids or one of the grandboys, and most people, the reason why that was, is just like my mother, nobody knew our names. Even to this day, at 42 years old, my mother quite frequently calls me Tommy John Dennis Timmy. Which is amazing, but anyways, Dad was my idol growing up. A lot of people idolize ball players and celebrities, But to me, Dad was my idol. I always wanted to be like him. Well, minus the turtlenecks and those god-awful shiny shoes. I have a very unique perspective of Tom Graham. Obviously, Dad at home. He was my 7th grade history teacher. I got called into the guidance office, and the guidance counselor asked me, "Are you really sure you want your father for your history teacher?" And I said, "Yes, I do, because I want to be challenged by the best teacher in the school." And it was a very unique opportunity for me. But just as Mr. Pastor, my name was also changed as well. I became known as Graminsky during the class, and had a very difficult time calling my father Mr. Graham, but we got there eventually. He was also my high school baseball coach for 4 years. He coached against me down at East Bridgewater when he was a coach there. He was my mentor as a coach as I began my coaching career, and later on became a great friend as I started my own family. If Dad was here, he wouldn't want to spend a lot of time about his records and accolades. He'd rather spend his time focusing on the things that really matter to him. His family, his friends, his fellow coaches, a lot of it who are here tonight, and his beloved players. I will speak about Dad for a few minutes to acknowledge him. He was a teacher and coach for 38 years. He was a high school baseball coach for 38 with 326 wins. He coached all 4 of his sons in high school, and it was something that was very special. My freshman year of high school, I was a freshman, my brother John was a junior, my brother Tommy was a senior. We were all on the same team, and my cousin Eddie was also on that team. And the way that he handled it, he treated us just like he did every other kid, because they were his kids. Every kid he ever coached were his own children, and that's the way he coached him. He was a football coach at Spelman for a few years. He was an Abington football coach for 15, and then later concluded his football coaching career at East Bridgewater for 16 years, where he was named the MIA Assistant Football Coach of the Year. As he said earlier, he's a member of the High School Baseball Coaching Hall of Fame, and also the Stonehill College Hall of Fame. Though that's really about as much time as Dad would spend on his accomplishments. What I wanted to do was spend a little time in talking about him as a man, and the way that he handled things and influenced my life. He had a very unique way of coaching, to say the least. He was always known for his sayings. My grandmother's faster than you. Don't tell me, show me. It was the same quotes he said at home as he did on the ball field. For the nicknames, we all had nicknames, just like was talked about earlier. Everyone had a different nickname. You always wanted to work to get a nickname from Dad that was special. Whether you were a student of his or a player of his, you always worked to get a nickname. Hopefully it was a good one. He always had cast of characters around the program. They were former ball players that would come back and coach, and it was always a pleasure to hear some of their stories about Coach Graham, some funny, some not so funny. And then there was the Graham glare, and as we stand here right now, I feel like I'm getting the Graham glare from that picture that's over here. With Dad, even now as he gets on in years and struggles with Parkinson's, it's hard for him sometimes to communicate, but it's funny, the same looks that I used to get as a child and be able to interpret what it meant are the same looks that I now communicate with my dad as I go see him at the nursing home. He had a way about him, very unique individual, very different from any other coach that I had over the years, for he always led with the mental side of the game. It was always about the individual first. What's inside you? How can we get more out of you? What pushes your buttons? That's the angles that Dad worked on quite frequently. He was a fantastic coach from the X's and O's side of things and the technique side of things. But what he really wanted to do was pull the best person out of every single person that he coached. Everybody on the team had a role. Your best effort was always expected, no excuses. Whether you were throwing bat in practice or hitting fungos or coaching third base, you were expected to do your best, and you wanted to, so that you were noticed and recognized by Dad. You wanted his praise. He was relentless. He would get it on anybody. Growing up, when I was in high school, we had this little kid hanging around the program. I think we would have more babysitting than anything else, and he turned into being our bat boy. This little kid with big old glasses. And Coach would ride his butt when he didn't hustle up to the plate to go get the bat, which was always funny to see. Right, bud? Every day I have moments where I need a little bit of guidance, and I ask myself, how would Dad handle this situation? It's the same conversations I have with a lot of his former ball players. What he learned on the field helped him to translate into life and how he dealt with issues. Not a day goes by where I don't thank him for instilling his values, his hard work, his passion, his way of life into me. He's simply the most honest, honorable, hardworking person I've ever met. And to this day, I want to be like him. He still is my idol. These days, I have 3 children of my own, and they all talk about swag, right? So the young kids, swag is the way you carry yourself these days. Dad had swag way before there was swag. He carried himself in a way where he was larger than life, which was amazing considering he drove around in a second-hand station wagon with tools and a lawnmower hanging out the back of his car. Or the fact that he would wear sweatpants and high white socks with his patent leather shoes. He was very unique, to say the least. He was very special. He knew he was special, not in an arrogant way, but in a very confident way, because he knew what his purpose in life was. He loved to tell us the story over and over and over again about how he left his $6,000 a year CPA job to become a $300 coach. And again, would change his famous quotes into his own, would always say he was the richest man in the world. I now understand what that means as I get older and I raise my kids. We didn't have a lot of the things that some of the other kids had, but what we had was a very special parents who always took care of us, always taught us the right way to do things, with no excuses. People remember my dad as a baseball coach in town, but he was also a phenomenal football coach. He had several undefeated teams here, and then back in the early 80s, there were Proposition 2.5 cuts and he lost his coaching job. It was something that very deeply hurt my father. Not because he lost his job, was that he couldn't coach his kids in his town. But he handled it with such grit, class, and grace. And it's something that I always appreciated. He did what he always did. He made the best of the situation. 2 days after finding out he lost his job, he got a call from East Bridgewater and Coach St. George. Went down there to coach for 16 years. It was always amazing to me how he handled himself in a situation where from December through July he was wearing green and gold, and then from August through November, he was wearing blue and gold. But all his kids appreciated him because he was an honest man. They were all his kids, whether they were from East Bridgewater or from Abington. It was always about his kids. He was asked by the Enterprise when he won his 300th game, what did it feel like? And his response was, the wins are the boys and the losses are mine. That was the type of coach he was. It was always his kids, always his boys first. Recently, one of our fellow alumni, Mike Hazen, was named the Red Sox general manager, which is quite an accomplishment. But Dad would be quick to tell you that Mike is the second best general manager to ever have coming out of Abington. Scott Slaney was the best general manager we ever had coming out of Abington. When I was in high school, I was introduced to Scott Slaney. He became a very special part of our team, but in true coach fashion, he held Scott to the same standard as all his players. Scott was expected to be on time. Scott was expected to give his best effort, and quite frequently, Dad would ask Scott, what did his hitter do last time up? And if Scott wasn't quick with the response, Dad would ride him like he would any of his players, which used to make me laugh sometimes, but that was his way. Everybody was his kids. We were all held to the same standard. There was another time we had a little bench clearing altercation with the local community Hanover. It was a rather interesting moment. The next day in the newspaper, there was a picture of one of our players hitting one of their players, and the caption of the story led us to believe that our kid was responsible for the incident, which in fact was not the case. My dad was furious because it was one of his guys. He called up the editor of the Enterprise, and the next day in the paper there was a full apology to Coach Graham and his players. That's just who he was. We all have countless photos of football teams hanging at Mom and Dad's house, former ball players, former teammates, and it's funny, as I look at those pictures, my brothers and I, my sisters, we're in those photos. There were great memories growing up. And as I run into a lot of his former ball players, very rarely the stories about the wins and losses or their own individual accomplishments. The stories about the relationships that they had with my dad, the special relationships they had, to help them through tough times, to encourage themselves to be pushed further, to go out and put yourself on the line to see what you can accomplish. The contact that he kept with former ball players, and even tonight, earlier this evening, Kevin Hall came down to visit my dad at the nursing home. It was a very special and touching moment for me to see somebody who took time out of their life to go visit my dad, just to say thank you. Over the years, the weddings, the babies, the success stories, those were all wins for my dad as well. For all of us that have ever competed for or coached with my dad, it all ends with a win. We all are better people for having known you. Coach was always known for his long post-game speeches, win or lose, and I mean long. If Dad was here tonight, you wouldn't be out of here till midnight. He would always talk about things about, this and that and everything, and I was his own son, so I heard it double time. Whatever I heard at home, I heard at the field. And a lot of times I would zone him out, which wasn't a good idea, because we'd have a crash course on the way home in the station wagon. But there were a lot of the conversations that still stay with me today, and as I coach and raise my own children, they're the same questions that I pose to my kids. Dad would always talk about, what's your legacy? How do you want people to remember you? Those are the few things that really stuck with me over the years. Well, I want to answer that question for Dad. We are your legacy, your family, your friends, your fellow coaches, your former students and ball players. We are all better people for having known you. It is truly an honor for me to be here on my dad's behalf. I want to thank you for this opportunity. I want you all to continue to remember those things that Dad taught you and bring those to your own families. Because those are the most important things that I've ever remembered about my dad. It wasn't how to hit a curveball or how to hit a fastball. It was how to fight through adversity, how to overcome, how to be humble in the way you do things, and always trying to do right. And that's who Dad was. Again, I thank you for honoring Coach Graham this evening, and forever a member of the Abington Athletic Hall of Fame. God bless and thank you.
At this time, I'd like to ask John Graham and Ryan Graham if you could escort Mary Graham up to the podium so that Kathy can present the Hall of Fame commemorative pin to Mary Graham on behalf of Coach Graham.
Thank you. I'm Kathy Graham Dealis, Tom Mary's oldest child. I'm not a public speaker. I always think when I go to public speak of Dad saying to me, Kathy, just picture everybody in their underwear. And I don't know why that's supposed to comfort me, all of you in your underwear. Of all the honors Dad has received over the years, this would have been his favorite. From the moment he moved to Abington in 1964, Abington was his town. He loves this town. He loves the school system, the athletic programs, and most of all, its people. Along with many others, he dedicated his life to making Abington the special town that it is today. We would be so lucky to love our jobs the way he did. Teaching and coaching were by no means just a job to him, but a passion. He tirelessly went to work each day to make it the best it could be. Statistics and figures only show one side of his career. The other speaks volumes about him. This side was the side that our family saw exclusively. Each of the 6 of us children and mom have been told a variety of stories about Dad and how he impacted his life, how he impacted their lives. Dad, they're unfair, I can't. We've heard many stories about people having gum on their nose, running laps, all kinds of great stories about Dad from school, people getting hit with erasers. At that point, when I had him in junior high school and had to listen to these stories, I decided I needed to go to Cardinal Spellman because I was never going to be able to date any boy that went through Abington High School and had that as a coach. I did, however, marry an Abington boy years later who respected my dad and is still not scared of him. He lived saying, "Pay it forward," before the phrase was coined. He always had former students and ball players visiting our home, inviting him to join in their celebrations, such as graduations, weddings, and even class reunions. There have been a few little boys running around with the middle name of Thomas in his honor. Those things meant everything to my dad. I did not have Dad as a teacher or a coach. Our bonding experience came many years after high school. As many of you are aware, Dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2001. We knew very little about this disease at that time. A few years later, I approached Dad with a wonderful opportunity to participate in a Parkinson's study with Boston University. He was a bit apprehensive at first, but I approached this as a way for him to teach and coach these graduate students about the disease and be part of the improvements in care and eventually a cure. 3 days a week, we would go to Boston University 5 hours a day. He received speech, physical, and occupational therapy for 6 weeks. He would receive the benefits of these therapies. I would learn how to teach my family how to help him, and the grad students would be able to study his progress. It was a win on all sides. This was an invaluable opportunity for Dad to see his work as a coach and a teacher in a different light. We would like to thank the committee for choosing Dad to be inducted for this evening. He would surely thank his fellow coaches, ball players over the years. For Roger Woods, thank you for giving him this honor and by nominating him. He was so touched when you nominated his baseball field to be put in his name 10 years ago when he was able to attend that. He would have been delighted to be here this evening, but he'll be watching this from his nursing home on cable. Roger, he loves you like one of his own, and he would want me to congratulate his fellow honorees tonight and be humbled but to be among you. I wish I could read my writing because I wrote on the airplane this morning coming here. He would want me to say thank you to Mom. Mom, you gave him so much encouragement and support all these years. For 51 years you've been married to him. You've always been and still remain his rock. Thank you. Dad always told us that he was the richest man in Abington. This was because of his friends, fellow teachers, coaches, and family. He has been blessed with all these years in this great town that he loves so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Timmy and Kathy. Thank you, Mary, for accepting the pin. Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed to the final induction for this 2015 class, I'd like to introduce you to a woman who partnered with the Hall of Fame Committee by becoming our founding benefactor last year. Nicole Parantoy graduated from Abington High School in 1989 as an exemplary student athlete. 2 years ago, when Abington High School's athletic directors reached out to our alumni to try to establish the Athletic Hall of Fame, one of our first hurdles was our lack of public or private funding. We needed to partner with Abington High School graduates who believed in the empowerment of education, in the importance of extracurricular activities, and in the recognition of individual and team successes, and also giving back to your community and your school. Nicole was the first to step up, and with her generosity and determination, we formally established the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame last year, and we also created the Cornerstone Club. The Cornerstone Club was an idea we borrowed from other successful Hall of Fames, whereby our alumni and families of our alumni could donate funds to support and maintain the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame for years to come. As a former AHS soccer player and basketball player, as well as a hard-working academic, Nicole treasured the memories of her high school years, and her education, intensity, and determination led her to extraordinary successes at Harvard University and in her professional career. After graduating from Harvard with her BA in economics, she built a career on Wall Street with her impressive investment analysis skills at several distinguished Wall Street investment firms. Her work ethic and personality earned her the respect and admiration of her peers. She's been quoted in the Wall Street Journal, appeared several times as consultant for CNBC. Forbes magazine recognized Nicole as the #1 stock picker and top earnings estimator for the industrial conglomerate sector. And in 2008, she became the first ever female president of the Harvard Club in New York City, a position which she held for 3 years. Today, Nicole once again returns to Abington to support its school system, its sports program, and its athletic Hall of Fame. Simply put, without Nicole's investment and loyalty, and without the contributions of our other members of the Cornerstone Club, none of us would be standing here tonight recognizing the 5 outstanding individuals who are being inducted into the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me with a warm welcome to Nicole Aaron.
Sadly, I'm starting to hit middle age, so I actually need to use readers, which is a really tough thing. I've only done it for the last 2 weeks. First, I would just love everybody to sort of step up for Sean and for the committee. This has just been an incredible effort the last 2 years. This evening and last year's event are just phenomenal, and it would not be done without their effort. So please just join me. I'd also like to congratulate all of tonight's inductees with a special shout out to 2 people. I was privileged to be the recipient of the Christopher K. Wells Award when I graduated in 1989. He was an exceptional young man, and his induction into the Hall of Fame tonight is a well-deserved honor. The other shout out is to Coach Tom Graham. They say good coaches and teachers explain, but great coaches and teachers inspire. He has been my inspiration since 7th grade, so thank you, Mr. Graham. And now down to business and why I'm really up here. As Timmy mentioned, one of Abington High School's great student athletes was in the news recently. And I think Mike Hazen's perspective on Abington High School is one that we all share. At a press conference, when asked where he went to school, he did not reply Princeton, instead choosing to say, I went to Abington High School. We all share Mike's Green Wave pride in Abington High School, and this is why we all need to pony up and donate to support the Hall of Fame. So all the funds donated will go towards the establishment and maintenance of a permanent Hall of Fame in the new high school. So please, grab a pledge card, open your wallet. There are, I believe, donation boxes as you exit. Really, please just consider donating to celebrate your fond memories while you were a student at Abington High School, and to also honor tonight's inductees. Go Green Wave.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tim Wells. I'm a graduate of the high school class of 1976, and also a member of the nominating committee. It is my honor and privilege to announce tonight that Christopher K. Abington High School graduating class of 1975, will be the next inductee into the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame. It's also also my pleasure to invite Mr. Jeff Stone and Mr. Jonathan Wells to come forward. As a classmate of Chris, and on behalf of the Wells family, Jeff Stone has been asked to formally introduce and induct Chris into the Abington Athletic Hall of Fame, and the commemorative Hall of Fame pin will be presented by Chris's brother, Jonathan. Ladies and gentlemen, we are proud to induct as a member of the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame, Mr. Christopher K. Wells.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for hanging in for the whole evening. On behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Wells, Chris's sisters, Norma and Kim, his younger brother John, and the rest of the Wells family, thank you very much for this honor. Chris would have been extremely proud of this, being inducted into the second class of inductees of the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame, especially among such Abington sports luminaries like Mr. Pastor, Mr. Bates, Coach Graham, and Don Marriott. We'd also like to thank and acknowledge the work of Sean Riley, the Cornerstone Club, and the Abington High School Hall of Fame nominee committee for all of their efforts in making the Hall of Fame in this night possible for Chris and for the rest of this year's inductees. I was in third grade when we realized that Chris was going to be a special athlete. We were at recess or gym at Woodsdale Elementary School in West Abington. Chris got up the bat and hit a ball so far that I think Robert Greeno is still chasing it. Chris could have ran around the bases 3 or 4 times before the ball got back into the infield. The boys that were on the field talked about that hit for the rest of the day. Maybe Chris's athletic prowess started at the Mill Pond Swim and Tennis Club in Hanover, now I believe the Hanover YMCA, where Mr. and Mrs. Wells took their young family. He was a strong swimmer and developed his tennis skills there and went on to compete in that sport at the varsity level as a high school freshman and sophomore. Maybe his passion for sports blossomed while watching the Kellehers, the McSherrys, the Smiths, and other great athletes that this town seems to endlessly turn out. Wherever his passion for sports started, what made Chris truly unique among his sporty classmates, what separated him from other athletes in neighboring towns and from other athletes of the era at Abington High School, was his desire and ability to compete. Chris was simply a ferocious competitor. Chris was a good-sized kid, but not huge by any standard of the day. He had some God-given talent, but he wasn't a natural jump shooter, a natural hitter, a natural passer, catcher, or defender. He had a decent serve and backhand. He ran fast, but others ran faster. He was strong, unusually quick for his size, and incredibly coordinated. But what Chris had that made him so special as a high school athlete was his competitive spirit. He put in the work to get better. He trained to be in optimal shape to compete at a very high level. But he had an inner self that clicked into a higher gear when he was on the field or on the court. Chris had a mental toughness and an emotional outlook that said, bring any competitor on, bring any team on, we'll handle it. And we often did. That competitiveness inspired his teammates, inspired the fans who watched him play, and also inspired the best in the competition he played against. His very presence in an athletic event raised the emotional and competitive juices of all involved. Many of us don't consider bowling to be a sport. Chris did. When our group of friends went to Timberlane's, Chris just didn't need to have the highest score, which he most always did. He also had to whip that little ball down the lane the fastest, and he always did. But that wasn't enough. He made up a new competition. How far could we each throw the ball on a line drive, down the lane, in the air, before it hit the pins? Who do you think could throw that little ball the furthest down the lane, in the air, on a line drive, before it hit the pins? We got kicked out of that bowling alley more times for that activity. Or maybe it was because we, meaning Chris, broke that thing that comes down to clear the pin because that little ball smashed into it at such high speed. Chris played high school tennis as a freshman and sophomore and changed spring sports and moved to varsity baseball his junior and senior year. He played outfield and batting cleanup. He played football all 4 years and moved up to varsity midway through his freshman year, playing both offense and defense. And although he loved all sports and would have excelled in any sport he chose to play, basketball was his favorite. As a sophomore, Chris was an all-league selection for the Old Colony League. As a junior, he was an all-league selection for the Old Colony League and was its tri-captain. As a senior in 1975, Chris captained the South Shore League All-Star team, was a Patriot Ledger All-Scholastic. And as it says in the program that you received when you came in tonight, Chris held the Abington High School men's basketball scoring record for 29 years with 960 career points, and it took the introduction of the three-point shot to wrestle that record away from him. But trust me, as some of my friends will attest, had every shot Chris took been recorded on film and applied against the three-point circle rule, he would have ended with 1,300 to 1,500 points because a 20 to 25 foot jumper was no stranger to Chris Wells, and he made a bunch of them. Chris was also competitive in the classroom. He was a National Honor Society inductee his sophomore through senior year and graduated number 4 out of the 206 of us who graduated from the class of 75. At graduation, Chris was the recipient of the Abington Athletic Trophy for the Best Scholar Athlete and the Richard F. Morey Trophy for Top Student Athlete. So Chris went off to Dartmouth to get an education, play football. The rest of us went to our respective colleges and then came home for our first break at Thanksgiving. We met up on Park Ave behind the Plymouth Street Little League field, actually just down the street from here, a popular beer drinking spot at the time. So we all get out of our car and Chris starts out, I have this beer drinking game. By game he meant competition, called Zoom Schwartz Perfigliano and something else which I couldn't remember then and certainly can't remember today. What I do remember was that Chris played that game like the score was tied 60-60 with 3 seconds left against Rockland and Chris had ball. And yes, he was a champion at that game also. Chris was a great student, a fabulous athlete, and a terrific competitor. And all that is important as we recount his high school life story tonight as he's inducted into our Athletic Hall of Fame. But what is more important as we honor and remember Chris is that he was a wonderful child, a much-loved son, I'm sure a barely tolerable brother, and he was also a terrific friend. Chris had lots of very good and very close friends on and off the sports field because Chris Wells was a good and close friend to many. Those of us who were closest to him loved him as a brother and still do. Not just because he was a talented and spirited athlete and leader, but because he was a terrific human being. So along with Mr. and Mrs. Wells and the rest of the Wells family, we thank you again for honoring Chris for his many achievements and contributions to Abington High's very accomplished athletic history. Thanks very much.
At this time, Chris's younger brother, my good friend John Wells, is now going to bring and present the pin, the Hall of Fame pin, to his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bob Wells, along with the certificate of Hall of Fame induction. Bob and Barbara Wells, ladies and gentlemen. Now John would like to say a few words on behalf of his family.
Thank you, Sean. Well, it's been a very wonderful night tonight, a long night, so I will keep this very brief. Thank you to everybody that came tonight for staying all the way to the end. On behalf of my parents, Bob and Barbara, my sister Norma, my sister Kim, the rest of our family, and especially on behalf of my brother Chris, I would like to thank the selection committee for nominating him or for approving his induction in the Hall of Fame. It's an incredible honor, one that I know that he'll be very, very proud of, and one that I'm very proud of as well. I'd also like to thank Chris's friends for all the information they provided me with so I could do the application, submit the application for his induction. When he was in high school, I was too little to really appreciate his athletic ability and accomplishments, and they were incredibly helpful to me in trying to recreate all of his accomplishments so that I could put them on paper and submit them to the selection committee. So thank you guys. I'd like to also thank Jeff for such a wonderful tribute to my brother. I know you two are best friends, and he had some of the greatest friends in the world in your class, and I know that he cherished all of you. Lastly, I would like to thank my friends. My friends came here tonight to support me, and it means a lot to me. You guys were there for me 33 years ago when I lost my brother, and you're still here for me today. Thank you very much.
President of the nominating committee, our job is an easy one and it's an incredibly difficult one. I think you can see from the 5 people that were inducted tonight and those who were inducted last year, there's no question of the honors that they deserve and the honors they earned. So I want to again thank and congratulate Donna Marriott, Gordon Bates, Walter Pastor, Tom Graham, and Chris Wells. Thank you. To thank those members of the class of 2014 who came back this year to help us with this year's ceremony, and hopefully we'll invite some of this year's inductees to come on back in future ceremonies. Again, I'd like to remind you, please submit your nominations because there are so many people out there who deserve this honor. Hopefully it's going to take us many, many years to induct all of those people because there are such great quality people out there that some of us know more than others. So your help in submitting nominations is very helpful to this committee. And if you'd like to get on the committee, be my guest, because I want to get off it. Thank you to the Emerald Hall. Thank you to Bill Davis and Bill Marquardt for taking photos. Before you leave, I would like to ask all the inductees, once again, to come on up front with your families. I'd like to take a series of photos with you to commemorate this special night. I hope you enjoyed it. You inductees certainly earned it. Thank you again on behalf of the Abington High School Athletic Hall of Fame. Please make sure to take home your commemorative hats on the table, the centerpieces from pitcher, catcher, bat, and Mike Haggerty. Thank you.
Go ahead, Leo. Give him the picture. You can keep the bat. Leo, hold on. Oh, I want to talk to you. Yeah. It's okay. Good to see you. Oh, check out this picture. This one's awesome. Hi, Sophie. Oh, that's great. I'm sure there are a lot of efforts going on. All right. I know. Oh, I slept a little on my introduction. You too. Nice to meet you. I can't. Oh my God. That's why you're great. I can't read on the camera. I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh my